Okay, so welcome everybody to this podcast. It is a joint venture between LSBU AHP BAME Academics in Conversation series, BAMEOTUK Network, Let's Talk series, and Brunel University Occupational Therapy course. We are tonight going to discuss leadership and Black, Asian, and other ethnicities populations, what it means, and how do we get there? So welcome and thank you all to be our panel of leaders for volunteering your time this evening. This is a timely topic for discussion in relation to representation of people from global majority populations in leadership positions in the UK. The Chief Allied Health Officer, Susan Rastrick, in her 2020 blog, stated that the population of leaders from Black, Asian, and other ethnicities groups is well below 10%. This is below the UK population average of 13.9% and significant below the NHS workforce average of 19.9%. In education, fewer than 1% of professors at UK universities are Black, and few British universities employ more than one or two Black professors, and this is from the HESA data 2018-19. Well, this evening we thought we would bring together some leaders from different BME backgrounds and hear about their journey to their leadership positions, to inspire us and to show us that leadership is for us. Before getting into discussions, could we introduce ourselves? And let's start with the panel first. Please, could you tell us your name, your ethnicity, and your leadership position? So if I start again, Maria, would you like to start us off, please?
Yeah, my name's Maria Stokes. My ethnicity is I'm half from Ghana and half from Ireland, so quite a rich mix there. And my professional background is in physiotherapy, and I'm currently the Professor of Musculoskeletal Rehabilitation in the School of Health Sciences at the University of Southampton.
Welcome, thank you, Maria. And Denise.
Hello, everyone. I'm Denise Sterling. I'm an occupational therapist by profession. My most recent occupational therapy leadership role was as head of occupational therapy for a large acute trust in the north of England. I am currently a non-executive director for a foundation trust in the north, and I'm a proud African Caribbean woman.
Welcome, Denise. Thank you. Andre, over to you.
Hi everyone, my name is Andre. I am by profession an occupational therapist. My background, my mum is from a small little island in the Caribbean called St. Kitts, and my dad is from Ghana, like Maria. And currently I am an operations manager, sitting in a senior management role for a local authority in the southeast of England.
Welcome, Andre. Vimal, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Vimal Sriram. I'm an occupational therapist with background as well. My ethnic background, I'm from India. My parents still live back there. And my job, I work as the deputy team lead for the collaborative learning and capacity building team within the NIH Applied Research Collaboration in Northwest London.
Welcome, Vimal. Thank you very much. And Juin and myself, we're co-hosting the session. So Juin, do you want to introduce yourself and then I'll introduce myself?
Okay, sure. Thank you, Mish. My name is Joyin and I'm a lecturer in Brunel University, London. I'm also the Racial and Cultural Equity Lead for Occupational Therapy. And I'm Malaysian Chinese, new migrant.
Thank you, Juin. And my name is Mushrat Ahmed Landu. My preferred address is Mish. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm British, but my ethnic background is Asian Bangladeshi. I'm a senior lecturer at London South Bank University in allied health professions, mainly on the occupational therapy course. And I am the convener of the Race and Cultural Equity Group, which was formed from discussions with Joanne in what she is doing at Brunel University. And I'm also the convener of the Allyship and Cultural Equity Group. And I'm co-leading the Decolonising Curriculum Agenda for Allied Health and involved with the wider university regarding improving the academic and institutional experience of students and staff from the global majority populations. Yeah, that's me in a nutshell, probably not. So I'm going to go on to my first question. What does leadership mean to you? Can I start with Vimal, please?
I think I see it in sort of three different ways. I see leadership as something that you do yourself. So you act as a role model, you set a goal and a vision for the work that you're doing, the teams that you work with, the organization that you're leading. The second bit is how you interact and shape things for others, so how you guide and mentor others. And because leadership doesn't occur in a vacuum, you need to be able to effectively communicate. And that's what leadership is, to be able to convey your thoughts and ideas and lead a group of people. And thirdly, I also think, to me, leadership also is how you empower others as well, how you celebrate achievements, how you share responsibility, how you shoulder the blame, and help other people grow. So
Thank you.
My version of what leadership means.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Denise, over to you. I think you have to unmute.
I would agree with what's been said. I also think, for me, that leadership isn't about just individuals or maybe at the top of the chain. I believe that leadership is something that occurs at every level within organizations. And I think, for me, leadership is about relationships. It's relational. It's about hearts and minds. It's about the vision that a leader has and the values that the leader is wanting to share with the team that the leader has. And it's, as already has been said, it's about empowering and ensuring that, you're taking people along with you and that they are developing their skills so that, leadership isn't about one person. It's about people working together.
Thank you. And I tagged on to the question, how long have you been in your current leadership position? Vimal, can I go back to you and then come back to Denise again?
About 6 years now.
Thank you. What about you, Denise?
I was in my last post, I was leading in that role for about 14 years.
Thank you. Maria, can I go to you with that question?
Yes.
What does leadership mean to you?
Thank you. Well, to me, it's leading by example, and also getting people to work together as a team. That's what I see as being important in leadership. And as Vimal said, helping people to grow and also enabling them to grow. They might grow in a different way to the way that you grew or the way you think they should. So really giving them some space to do that. And one of the most fulfilling things for me is seeing people grow and get bigger than I am and letting them go. So yeah, I think for me, it's a lot about sort of enabling people and supporting people. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And how long have you been in your professor post, may I ask?
Well, this particular post I've been in for 16 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Andre, can I go to you?
Yes, of course. Yeah, leadership. When I think of leadership, I mean, the first things that kind of come to my mind is responsibility, being accountable for your decisions, decisiveness. I would say as well. Ultimately, I think as leader, you're only as good as the teams that you manage. If you can be the greatest leader in the world, but if your team's not well prepared, been given the right resources, given the right agenda, then it's not going to be beneficial. So I always think about, when I think of leaders, about how we can influence people to just be better, have the right skill set, be prepared for the missions ahead, because we tend to work in very stress and anxiety provoking fields. So it's all about influencing staff to build that resilience, challenge themselves, put themselves in uncomfortable situations where they learn from, and trusting staff. I think it's very easy to try to take all the responsibility in terms of what needs to be done, but actually it's good to delegate activity to people, which then allows them to grow, and builds their confidence as well. Yeah, and I guess that feeds into kind of the empowerment of staff as well. Yeah, the kind of initial things that come to my mind. Yeah.
Thank you. That was really interesting, and also because there's a lot of commonality there. Juin, do you want to add something after the second question, sort of rounding up question 1 and 2, your thoughts?
Yeah, sure.
Gathering
That would be
thoughts.
great. Yeah. Thank you.
So I'm going to go on to question.
I'm making notes.
Me too. I'm actually taking lots of notes and thinking, I need to do some of that somewhere. So question 2 is, could you briefly tell us about the journey to your leadership position? Did you hear that question? Did you hear that question,
No,
everybody?
you muted yourself. We didn't hear it.
Okay, I'll do it again. So over to question 2 now. Could you briefly tell us about the journey to your leadership position? And can I go to Maria first?
Well, this is going to be a long one. So it was many years, but I'll summarize it. So I, 2 years after qualifying as a physiotherapist, I went to do a research physio job in Oxford. And my boss, who was a medic and doing his MD, and he had a Department of Health grant, and he suggested that I do a PhD because I'd find it very difficult to get back into physiotherapy if I didn't, but also I wouldn't be able to compete with other people, research scientists. So I did my PhD there. And then as a postdoc, I went to Liverpool to the Department of Medicine. And I mean, my work was in mechanisms of muscle weakness and fatigue. That's what I was working with at the time, and aging. So I spent 4 years in Liverpool in the Department of Medicine, and then I went to Australia, to the University of Queensland, as a senior lecturer in physiotherapy, and carried on my research there. Then I came back to the Royal Hospital for Neurodisability in Putney in London as the Director of Research and Development in the hospital. So I was getting involved in lots of different types of research there. And then I came to my current post in the University of Southampton in 2004. So I sort of took a strange route, but it was really good to be back into go back into the physiotherapy. That was in the department in Australia, so that I could bring all the science I've learned from different areas back into the clinical area. So that's me.
Well, that's really interesting. So in a way, you got pushed back into academics before you could then get on and get into physiotherapy. So that's a interesting push.
I haven't been clinical since 2 years after I qualified, so it was physiotherapy research that I got back into. Yeah.
Right.
I was doing all sorts of other. I was mainly doing physiology research from my PhD time in Oxford.
And did you want to get clinical, or did you want to go to that route of being a researcher?
I really missed the boat because there wasn't that structure at the time for doing clinical academic research like there is now, which is great. You had to come out. So there wasn't the PhD in physiotherapy either. So I did my PhD in physiology at the time. But I think now it's great that you have the option to stay clinically skilled so that your research remains very relevant to your clinical practice. So I now rely on clinicians to make sure that happens because I don't have those skills myself.
Thank you for answering my extra little question there as well. Andre, do you want to answer that one?
Yes. So I guess my journey is a bit shorter than Maria's, I think. So I actually qualified in 2012. Hence why Anita probably remembered me. And from that point of qualifying, I went straight into the acute sector, which I think is, I always kind of recommend to therapists when they leave uni, is to throw themselves into the acute sector, because I think that's where you build your resilience. And you'll get put into the most stressful, anxiety-provoking situations, which will then mean that everything else you come across doesn't really seem that stressful to you. So I went to the acute sector, and then I went over into the community, and then I went into the private sector, and yeah, I went into basically every sector you can imagine in rapid succession. I never really stayed anywhere for a long period of time. I think a year was the max, and I think that's what kind of built my my kind of just confidence and resilience to working in this field. And after that, I went into senior roles in terms of within teams, and then I took over as team manager. So I team managed for a number of years, and then I went into the senior management position I'm in now, in an operational management sector, which is a different ball game in terms of not just managing your own profession. Because for a good while I was managing as an occupational therapy team manager, and it was about one topic, it's about one area, it's about one profession. Strategically, you're thinking about your area only. It's when I went into this role, which I've been in for about 18 months now, that I had to manage other professions, manage different areas of which I wasn't of my expertise. Again, that gave me the opportunity to develop, placed me in uncomfortable positions where I had to have the solutions, think of the solutions, think outside the box. So it's been a really, really good positive experience for me professionally, this role. And I think it's really important for occupational therapists to attempt to go into senior management roles where it's not just their profession, because then it allows them to widen their scope of going to further managerial positions of influence, just not in the scope of our area, and then able to put our occupational therapy holistic mindset into some of the strategic decisions which are being made, which impact wider populations, because a lot of the decisions, they're not made with that kind of biopsychosocial mind state at all. And it's quite interesting, some of the considerations you can put on the table which are never considered as an occupational therapist. So yeah, we definitely bring a lot to the party once we kind of break the ceiling which sometimes gets placed on us due to our profession.
And I think, Andre, you remember the buzz you created from the podcast we did with the Black male occupational therapist. People were on Twitter saying, oh my God, now I can see where else I can go. I was feeling stuck in my career. Now I can see somewhere else that I can go. And then people started DMing BAMEOTUK UK and saying, can we have some podcasts about leaders, please? Can we see some leaders, please, talking? And we were like, okay, we're going to do this. And here we are on this podcast. Yeah. And thank you very much for coming. Vimal, do you want to answer that question?
Again, not as lengthy as Professor Stokes' space. I trained in India, so I finished my undergrad education there, and then I worked in the same hospital that I trained in. I worked in a unit for spinal injury and traumatic brain injury clients. Then moved to the UK in 2005. And I worked for 3 years in an acute hospital. I was team lead for an OT service there for orthopedics, trauma, and general surgery. And as part of my role, I was also tasked at that time to bring together OT teams working in 2 different sites and try and bring them together and harmonize services, as it were. It was set as a challenge, and I thought, okay, let's see how we get on and do this. And it sort of worked well. I'm still very grateful for my teammates for cooperating and making it work. And that sort of gave me a boost, thinking, I'm very new to this system. I have never worked in NHS before. And they were very patient and very understanding with me and helped me work there and lead those teams. So it was quite a good experience. I moved in 2008 to London. I moved to be an OT team lead in intermediate care bedded services. And after 2 years, I took over leading a therapy-led bedded services unit. So it was staffed by therapists mainly. We also had nurses, and it was entirely therapy nurse-led unit, and was leading that. And in 2011, our organization was undergoing a massive change. And at that time, there was a job that was advertised for a clinical education lead within the trust. And it's a job that was advertised at that point mainly for nursing colleagues. And my manager at that time said, oh, you should apply for this. You've got the skill sets and you should be able to lead this. And it's a nice progression for you. So I called my then recruiting manager and said, look, change it. So why does it have to be a nurse? Change it to an AHP as well. If you bring clinical skills to the job, it doesn't have to be a nurse. So I changed it, thankfully. So I applied and was successful in the job. And then I moved to, that was my first senior management post within the NHS. So I did that for 2.5, 3 years. And during that time, I also completed my MSc. But sort of started an interest in research and evidence-based practice. So I moved to my current job to experience and be with the team that did lots of research. So I moved to that job, which was, again, hosted by the NIHR. At that point, they were called the Collaborations for Leadership in Applied Health Research and Care. So I moved there, and I've been there since. And other bits and pieces that I've done through that time in leadership roles was I became a board member representing HPs for the Royal Marsden School. I also applied for and was successful in getting a NICE fellowship. So I think I was the second OT to become a NICE fellow after Julia Scott, who's the president of the Royal College. And then I applied for, and now currently doing that as well. I'm a fitness to practice panel member for the HCPC, so I do that as well. And since 2017, I've been doing my PhD part-time, so I spend half my week doing my PhD stuff and half the time doing work stuff. So that's my journey.
Wow. I'm listening to all your leaders and I'm thinking, do you have a life? Do you have time for yourself? That's an interesting, another conversation. Denise, can you answer that question for us too?
I can. And I have to say that I'll make mine as short and as brief as I can, because I think that's I win hands down. I trained at the tail end of the 70s and actually qualified in 1980. So as you can see, I've got a very long history in the profession. And like Andre, I started off, I thought I was going to specialize and become a mental health occupational therapist, and decided that I would consolidate my skills in the acute setting first, but joined an acute setting, loved it. And in fact, my entire career has been as an acute occupational therapist. And so I, in my first two clinical roles was in an acute setting. And in terms of my journey, well, I just want to share very quickly in terms of my journey that it hasn't only been the actual role I've been in, but some of the other activities and initiatives that I got involved in that I think has helped to help me to develop the skills and has shaped my career. So fairly early on as a junior occupational therapist, I became involved in the professional body and as a member of the British Association of Occupational Therapy. That really helped in the early stages for me to understand the profession and also to help me to develop additional skills as well as consolidating my clinical skills at an early point of my career. And that ultimately led on to me becoming a rep, sitting on the council for the College of the Occupational Therapists at that point. And then also I became a co-chair for an equality committee that we had many moons ago. And so I worked in different settings and developing my skills and developing services. I developed a new rheumatology service at a community hospital, and I was the first occupational therapist to work there. That again helped to develop my resilience, actually helped me to be really confident and clear about the occupational therapy role as the only occupational therapist, having to share that on a regular basis. I had an opportunity to test the water before in my first headship role, and I was in an acting position for a few months, which was great. It gave me an opportunity to see whether I liked this role. And then so I moved into my first head role. I also, in terms of networking, became part of a really successful regional Black women managers network in the north of England and sat on that committee, which actually gave us access to NHS England, and we actually got quite a lot of support fairly early on. Early in 2001 too, I was involved in the organisation I worked in at that time, went through a large merger, and any of you who've been through a merger, you know that it's a challenging, can be a very brutal and very painful experience. I came out of the other side of that in a new role. I was successful and was appointed into a clinical services manager's role, which meant that I had responsibility for over 200 staff, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, dietitians, speech and language therapists, podiatrists, and oversight of some psychology staff. So that was a major in terms of learning, change management, all the cultural issues that you get in a merger. After that, I was able to go on and do my master's, which I did that specifically in leadership and managing innovation and change, because that's at that point, I thought that was the most important thing for my career. That really helped me to understand organisation, organisational culture, strategy, and so on. I then moved on, and I'll make this brief, 1 minute. I moved on around 2014. I went into a project management role for a couple of years and took on a very challenging project across all the AHP professions and psychology to do a major transformation project, and also to release something in the region of 1.5 million in cost improvement. And I think that has been the most challenging thing in terms of my resilience, and actually feeling on occasions very much alone. And that's when I had to dig deep in terms of my leadership skills. I retired, as I said, in 2018, not because I was unhappy. I decided that I would retire when I was still really enjoying my role as an occupational therapist and as a leader in the profession. And then I had an opportunity, and an opportunity was presented to apply for a non-executive director's role. And I went through the process because at that point I felt there was nothing, I didn't have anything to lose. And it was a very challenging and competitive process. But, you know, as Andre said, I just want to say again that, you know, as occupational therapists, we have an immense array of transferable skills. And so I've been a non-exec since the beginning of this year. And, you know, it has its challenges because I've gone straight into COVID. But even with the challenges, the skills that I have as an occupational therapist has put me in a very good place. And so, you know, we can go into many areas. And I would like to encourage people not just to think about what they can deliver as an occupational therapist, also what they can deliver in many other roles as well. And I'm sorry, I've taken too much time, but as I said, I've got 40 years nearly of a career journey.
Yeah, you conned us there. You said, I'm going to be brief. And then I was like, where's she going? Where's she going?
Well, you don't have to come back to me. That's it now. You can forget me for the rest of this conversation.
No. I think the thing I just want to bring back to is that I think wherever we are in AHP, it's really becoming apparent that we can widen our opportunities and experiences. We don't have to be told that we have to stay clinical. If there's opportunity, then we should take it. Juin, I'm going to come to you for some words of summary.
Yep, definitely agree with you, Mish, about, you know, well, you don't just have to stay in one straightforward path. I think all of you have clearly illustrated that there's no straightforward path to leadership, but there are also certain commonalities. Like I noticed that all of you are very active experience seekers, you know, like you embody what Steve Jobs says, you know, you stay hungry, stay foolish. And all of you describe leadership as a very people-oriented endeavor. Like Andre says, you know, you're only as good as the teams you manage. I really like what Denise and Vimal talked about when describing the journey, because they also talked about the people who empowered them and uplifted them. It just really enforces that leadership is a people-oriented endeavor, you know. And it's also quite aligned with Maria's principle of giving people space to grow bigger than you are. I thought that was really wise, and I think that's definitely something that more leaders should be aware of and be mindful of. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Juin. That was really helpful summary. What did you say? Active experience seekers. You're all active experience seekers. I like that term. Very interesting term. Did you say that was Steve Jobs, was it?
No, Steve Jobs was saying, stay hungry, stay foolish. The experience seekers thing, it just reminded me of how we talk about sensory seekers in occupational therapy. And I was like, oh, you know, these people really make the effort to go and seek experiences, just like what Andre did. You know, he's switching jobs every year, switching a different field every year. Like, and then, you know, Maria shifting countries, Vimal shifting countries, you know, wow. Actively seeking adventure and experience.
Ooh, yes, I like that. I like that. I'm going to go on to question 3. I'm quite aware, Maria, that I might keep coming to you as the first person for the next 2 questions because I know you might have to go. So if I come to you for question 3 first, and I'll just say what question 3 is. Why is it important to have representation? What are the enablers and barriers for people from the global majority populations progressing into leadership positions in their careers? Maria.
Right. Yeah, the trouble with going first is I miss out all the juicy bits because I was just trying to get down my list last time. So this came up with some really good things. But yeah, so, well, obviously it's really important to have representation, to, you know, having presence raises an awareness. And this has really come to light in the last few months, actually, since, you know, Black Lives Matter movement started, and keeping things on the agenda as well. The representation helps with that. And I think also when, you know, enables solutions to be found from the right perspective, rather than people guessing what might be needed. So I think that, you know, representation to me is, I think, yeah. So just about the barriers, enablers and barriers. The enablers really are line managers having the insight and understanding of the challenges that people might face. And I think one of the, it's just an observation that I have, and I don't know that there's anything behind this, and it would require research to show any evidence, but sometimes I find people who find it difficult to sell themselves or push themselves, you know, that's where the managers are needed really to encourage them to go for things. Some people will volunteer for everything, whether they can do it or not. And you know, I find some people who are really, really good, but they just don't have that confidence to speak up. And you know, I was like that myself, although I seem to be, you know, going for all sorts of things. You know, when you grow up in a country where you're not seen as being, you know, well, it might be seen as inferior. You don't volunteer for loads of things. You don't, and you know, I've only gone for things when I've really felt confident that I can do them. And I think Vimal was saying that somebody sort of encouraged you to go for something. Now, I also had similar things happen where the job that I came back from Australia for was advertised for a medic, and my PhD supervisor, who was still mentoring me, said, "Why don't you go for it? It doesn't matter. It doesn't say you can't be a physio, you know, they won't go to a physiotherapist." So I went for it and I got the job. So it was just really good having somebody encouraging me to do that. I would never have gone for that. I would have never, it was advertised in the Lancet. I wouldn't have seen it. So I think that's really important. And the barriers, you know, there are obviously unconscious bias of people, but also lacking the confidence. That's the barrier that I see and that I saw in myself and I see in other people. So.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you. Yes, someone believing in you, and you know, that lacking in confidence being a barrier for self. Yeah, yeah. I feel that. I feel that. Vimal, can I ask you that same question?
Yeah, I mean, not terribly too much to add to what Maria was saying earlier. From the enablers perspective, I can speak from my experience as having good role models where you can model yourself on. And, you know, I've been lucky enough to have good role models, people who have encouraged me, who have made sure that I had the right chances at the right time to go off and do what I wanted to do. And you know, when things didn't work very well, I could still go to them and say, look, this isn't working. What should I do? So they were, even though it was my project and my thing to do and, you know, deliver, they still supported me and encouraged me. And I, one of my previous managers is, you know, I still stay in touch with him like 10, 12 years after he was my manager. And I still ask him for advice and support sometimes and say, look, you know, this is happening. What would you do, sort of thing. So I think I've been lucky enough to have that. And I think for most people, having those type of role models is very essential. And if you have good role models, then you sort of tend to be a better leader, I think. The other aspect of, from BAME perspective in terms of enablers, I think you also need good allies, you know, who are on your side, who are in positions of influence and power, who will, you know, make those opportunities and chances available to you and to others. I think that's very important as well. And for, as an individual, I think it's also important for people to recognize that they have a very unique and distinctive perspective that they bring from their cultural background or from their, so I grew up in India and I trained as for my education very, very differently to education perspectives in the UK, for example. And, you know, I could sort of bring that here and do certain things that people here wouldn't generally have done. And I think that recognition within individuals, I think, is a good enabler as well. Barriers, this is more tricky again. It's about, I suspect a lot of good leaders don't come forward simply because they're not aware of the opportunities. They don't know what's available. And like Maria was saying now, if you don't see the advert because it's placed in the Lancet, or if you think, oh, it's not for me, I think that's a huge barrier in itself, simply because you're not aware of the opportunities and you're not moving in the right circles, and you're just not being told what to do and what is right or what is wrong. I think, again, for what is seen generally as good skills for leadership is like things like, you being a good communicator, being an extrovert, exuding that confidence. And for lots of people, that is a struggle. And, I'm a terribly introverted person. I sit in a room very quietly observing and listening to people before I even voice an opinion. Having to change that, and when you're in a leadership position and when you have to chair meetings or be in other meetings with other leaders, etc. It's sort of, you need those skills, and developing those skills takes time. And that in itself is a barrier if you don't know whom to go or how to approach that. And I'll again echo what Maria was saying in terms of, sometimes we never big our achievements, we never speak about our triumphs. We are much more, happy to be humble and quiet and not bleat on about what we've done or achieved. I think that's a barrier as well. People don't talk to their strengths sometimes. And that's it for me.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something else there. That's why I didn't come in. Andre, would you like to come in on that?
Yes, of course. It's one of my favourite topics, really, to be honest. In relation to why representation matters, it is on a basic level, it shows people what they can become. After I finished studying, I never saw another black manager in our profession or anywhere I went. Never saw one. So for people who are thinking, okay, where can I go? What can I do? If you don't see yourself in those positions of influence and what you can call power, it's hard to be almost inspired to become one of them and think that it's possible. And people who then attempt to do it will always feel this sense of imposter syndrome and, oh, well, am I supposed to be doing that? Am I supposed to be going for that? So it doesn't breed a lot of confidence for people to put themselves forward for positions of influence, because they've never seen anyone who looks like them in those positions. No one's ever discussed their absence in those areas of influence. So I don't think it breeds a lot of confidence to people if they don't see anyone who represents them in those positions. So when you are in those positions, you'll be absolutely amazed how many black therapists or just team members across will come to you in private and say to you, like, we're so happy that you're in that position and you're inspirational and you make me want to go and do something similar. Like, it's incredible. You wouldn't even think it in your head, but people will come to you and say that, because you can never underestimate the lack of confidence some people have. Like myself, I would say I'm inherently probably a confident person, but there's many people who are not. And for you to be aware of that, sometimes it's difficult because you're so caught up in who you are. So definitely, as in terms of inspiring other people to want to move forward and go into management, it's important to have people in those positions who they can see their reflection in. Aside of that, in terms of influence in the strategic agenda, it's important that there's representation there, is because a lot of the decisions which get made can't fully consider those of a minority, because a lot of things, you can read about it, but a lot of the things which impact people, Black people and minorities, are lived experiences, which you have to have experienced it. You have to have been in the circumstance. You have to have been through it to be able to inform on it. It came to light a lot with the BLM stuff, when in my organizations, our response to it, a lot of the people in senior management in our organization are white. There's no other real races at all. So in order to respond and read the room in terms of how they should respond to it, they wouldn't have been able to just make those calls in an informed way. And it's really useful to have someone there who can advise and provide that influence, and that feeds down into the strategy of the organization, the service provision, where things are advertised, all types of nuances which are not considered if there isn't representation at that level. And you can't underestimate that, even in terms of recruitment, and trying to dissipate unconscious bias. It's great if you have another representation making decisions about recruitment, just to weed out any types of unconscious bias. It also just allows people to see people in a different light, in a different view. So if there's people, as a minority, we sometimes, especially if you live in London as well, you kind of underestimate how few of us there is in the country, in comparison. So there's some people who have never ever come across Black people, and literally never come across Asian people, really, not all really. And you think it's uncommon, but it's actually quite common. So when they then come, they'll have this view of Black people or Asian people because of what they've watched, what films they watch, what movies they watch, what music, whatever it is. And then when they see a Black person or Asian person or whatever it may be, a Chinese person in a place of influence, and they meet them, and you are able to obviously display who you are, it gives people a different perspective of who Black people are, who Asians are, who whatever the culture is, and it isn't just what is portrayed in the media. Sorry, I'm going on. So yeah, I think yeah, they're kind of the main things which I think are why representation is important at management level. Yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Andre. Yeah, I hear that. I hear that about needing to see people in those top positions to enable people to know that you can travel in that direction, and that's important to see. And also about mixing different people together, so you get to know all these different cultures that exist, and people are people. We're all part of the human race. It doesn't matter where our backgrounds are. Denise, can I go to you for that question? And Juin, again, I'm going to come to you after question 4, if that's okay.
Yes, for me, it's a no-brainer. The question of representation. In the country, the proportion of the working age population that comes from a BAME background is increasing year on year. And we're not going away. And so it's essential that we have representation at every level in every organisation. And there's so much out in the public domain. There's so much research out there which tells us that if you have a diverse and inclusive workforce, the benefits of that, for the economy, for if we just look at where we are in health and care and social care, that the outcomes for our patients and service users are so much better if there's a diverse and inclusive workforce. And it means then that, you know, there's such a rich range of skills, background, experiences that can be shared to ensure that, you know, the best services are accessible to the communities and are being provided. You know, so it's a no-brainer. You know, you get better staff experience, you get better recruitment and retention, you get organizational reputation enhanced, better productivity. So it's vital. I'm just, you know, frustrated that, you know, progress and change is not moving as quickly as it should. You know, as I've just shared with you, I retired at the end of 2018, and in a nearly 40-year career, even when I retired, I could still count on you know, on maybe a couple of hands the number of managers from and leaders from a BAME background that I knew and have access to. So the pace of change is not moving as quickly as possible. I agree with all that's already been said about confidence, and I think because of the lived experience of many, myself included, from previous experience, you know, it impacts on your self-esteem and confidence. And like as other people have shared, you know, I was fortunate that earlier on in my career, we didn't call it mentoring back in the day, but I had a mentor who actually said to me for my first leadership role, why haven't you applied? Why haven't you applied for that job? And so there's lots that organizations need to do around the talent, identifying talent and making sure that there's a structure and infrastructure in place that people can access that development support and programs to enhance their development. There's lots of barriers. It's already, you know, people have already shared unconscious bias, to name a few. The role model issue that, you know, if you can't see someone remotely like yourself, then there's nothing to aspire to. There's still issues around recruitment processes that need to be addressed. And I'll stop there because I could go on for a long time.
Thank you. I like that. No brainer, only gains. Thank you very much. Maria, have you got time to stay with us for the last question, which is what advice do you have for staff or educators from the global majority populations who want to make the move towards leadership?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Do you want me to do that now, or did you want summary? Thanks. Well, I suppose I'd have three things to say, really. Have the courage to be more proactive than you feel comfortable being in seeking the opportunities for leadership. Because it might not be, you know, come naturally to you to put yourself forward for things, but you can be surprised at what you're capable of if you know, really push yourself. And it's easier said than done, but it's worth doing. Then something I do is try and see barriers as challenges and not things that block my way. And I actually see them as things to energize efforts to achieve. So that's another thing I try and encourage you to do. And then stay true to your values. Now I was on a leadership course and my mentor said to me, do you think that you're in the wrong place? And I said, what do you mean, Southampton? And they said, no, academia. And they said, because your values are different to your peers, because mine was about sort of supporting people and other people were not doing that so much. And they're saying that, you know, my values don't seem to fit with the competitiveness of academia. So I said, well, that's all the more reason for staying in it and trying to influence it. And I just believe that aspects of the academic system stifle creativity, and that defeats the ethos of furthering knowledge. So just stay true to yourself and believe in yourself and don't let the system push you out. So that's mine.
Thank you. I held on to that barriers energize efforts to achieve. I'm going to put that somewhere. That's a great saying.
Challenges rather than barriers, because they're not really barriers. Yeah.
That's a great way to put it. Denise, do you want to come in on that? Oh, you're on mute.
Let me unmute myself. Yes, I would say that be intentional. Don't leave your career to chance. So, you know, be intentional about what you want to do and where you want to go. I agree entirely with Maria. Be authentic. I think that's absolutely critical, to be authentic and be true to yourself. Develop a network. Network also is really important. For me, I've used my network all through my career. One of the things for me is having an inner circle of individuals who understand the context of where you work and what you're doing, that you can use them to sense check, because sometimes it plays with your mind, the kind of responses you get, and you need to be clear about whether or not the response you've had is because of you and your colour, or whether actually the response is because, yes, you need to do better and there are issues that you haven't addressed very well. So I've had an inner circle that all the way through my career, I could use them to sense check and to decide if I needed to take action, or just to park someone's response to me because it's their issue and it's not mine. But my network has also helped me to progress in my career, and when I've had to make some challenging decisions around career, etc. And I think the other thing I would say as well is don't take no for an answer. So that supports what Maria said. You know, you'll be told no many times, but there are different ways of getting the outcome you want and to where you want to be.
Thank you. Thank you. It's that belief and that support and a kind of changing of mindset coming through. Vimal, do you want to answer that question?
Firstly, I'd say it's a combination of what Eugene was saying earlier and what Denise just said. It's about seeking out those opportunities very actively, building up those networks. And nowadays, you know, people are fortunate enough to have newsletters and Twitter, and, you know, you can follow the right people, make sure that you're in the loop of what's happening. Seeking out those opportunities becomes slightly more easier. And, you know, I'd also say be prepared to give your own time to what you want to achieve. So it might not happen during work time or your study time, or it might have to be your personal time that you sacrifice to start you off on that career towards better leadership. So be prepared to do that if needed. And I also think be prepared to be challenged. People will challenge you. People will ask why you want to do this, but also don't be afraid of failing. It's okay to fail. It's okay to ask. It's okay to learn. And that's, you know, failing and learning from that is the best way to learn. So be prepared to do that as well. And I think importantly, seek out someone who can act as your mentor. And I think that's important. But at the same time, once you reach a position of being a leader or, you know, as a senior, be sure to return the favor and mentor and coach other people to get where you have reached, and never forget to look back and say, I was like this person once. So if they ask you or trouble you or send you tons of emails asking for support and help, be sure to respond back and help them out as well.
Oh, I like that. Return the favor. Yeah, yeah. That sits with me. Andre, over to you.
Hey, what I would say is prepare yourself. Be clear about your aspirations. So you need to have that discussion with yourself and say, is going into management what I want to do? Are you sure you want to do that? Because if you want to do that, before you get to management, what you want to do is prepare yourself for the pressure and the responsibility that it's going to entail. So that will mean actively seeking out additional responsibilities, actively seeking out positions where you are going to feel uncomfortable, because I will say clearly, management is a lot more complicated and harder than just being a therapist. It's a lot more complicated and much more difficult. You're going to be put in all types of situations and have all types of scenarios which are going to mean you're going to need a lot of resilience. So before you put yourself forward for that, make sure that you've already built yourself up and put yourself into those scenarios where you've taken additional responsibility and behaved as if you'd want to assume those responsibilities. Be clear with your organization. Be clear with your organization about, if that is your aspiration, be clear with them and say, look, I'm really keen to go into management. What are the opportunities that you can provide me to support my progression to do that? If the organization is not going to support you going into management, and it might be you need to move. It might be, don't just sit there and think that this organization is going to just put you in those positions. It might be you need to move for you to dovetail your way into a position of more seniority. So you need to think strategically around that. For number one, is manager what I want to do, or is it just what you think you want to do? Because as I said, everyone here will tell you management is not easy. It's not. You wake up, you go to it. There's a lot of responsibility, especially in our field. We're not a pen pushing. It's not a pen pushing role. There's people's lives and well-being on the line with a lot of the services. So, and as you get more senior and you start managing more services, there's more people that are under your team's influence, and you have to understand that when you go into management, you are relying on other people to do what they need to do to meet your agenda. So it becomes a whole different dynamic. So prepare yourself for that is what I say. That's my views.
Thank you. I like that, the little preparation advice you gave there. Build yourself up, be clear, know your resilience, think strategic. Thank you. I'm going to give the floor to Joanne now, because hopefully she's been collecting some insights and she's going to feed that back to us. So over to you, Joanne.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much, Nish. Nish, I just want to also say thank you, Maria, for still sticking around. I wasn't sure whether you're going to be popping out soon. So I will be quick. One of the things that I noticed, the commonality between all four of you is that you talk about managing a certain type of tension, between the internal and external. And I think that is what a lot of, when I talk to students, when I talk to budding therapists, I think that is one of the things that they struggle with. I mean, you have talked broadly about role models and allies and sponsors. Maria has talked about this. Vimal has talked about this. But also what Andre talked about. What if you don't have them? How do you succeed despite not having those role models or allies or sponsors? Andre and Maria's narratives, there is quite a bit about self-determination, and being and daring to be different, and also what Vimal said about being prepared. So I feel like this is the eternal part that leaders need to be able to cultivate, whereby even though the structural situation, the environment that people are embedded in is that there is a general lack of representation. We have to agree on that. That's what Denise also talks about as well. Could it be overcome? By having this first of all, this eternal drive. It seems you seem to need it to be very strong. Yeah. And I'm also wondering, would people who feel like, oh, I can't do that, I'm not as determined as them, can I really do this? So it also helps to think about, like Vimal said, having allies, people who see opportunities and sponsor you towards them. and how with social media, there are even more opportunities to build the network, so that when you have the network, the opportunities are more likely to flow towards you rather than just you going against the grain. And I'm also wondering, some of the things that Denise and Andre talked about. You talk about clarity. What is your advice for people who don't have that clarity yet? Who feel like, oh, I'm starting out. All this you're talking about, yes, you're in very high positions of leadership, but it's really intimidating. I don't have this sort of determination yet. I don't have that sort of clarity yet. What about, will I be able to get to where you are? I'm just wondering, what do you think about that?
That's why I said it is important to put yourself in positions of responsibility within your teams to test out, do you want that pressure? Do you want that responsibility? Is it actually going to benefit your life to be a manager? Being a manager is stressful. There's some people who can't manage stress. It's not going to be good for their well-being. So it's good to test it out, see how you like it. And then if you're really keen on it, and you need to have that self-determination and that self-will to put yourself in above the parapet and say, you know what, I'm here, I can do the role, I'm responsible, and I'm going to be accountable. That is not, again, an easy thing. You're going to have a lot of people looking towards you, a lot of people looking at you, a lot of people who, even if they've made an issue, made an error, it's going to be on your head. It's a tricky place to be in sometimes, but it's really rewarding. Once you achieve your goals, the aspirations for the teams, and you push through all of those those service improvements and service developments, and you see people progress from being a junior to taking senior positions, and you see all of those types of self-development. It's like really rewarding. But I do believe you have to have a certain personality to want to do that. It's okay not to want to go in management. Actually, it's actually okay if it doesn't fit your personality. But yeah, challenge yourself to do it if you believe it's going to benefit you.
I agree with Andre, and I'm a real advocate for project work, and that's one, people should test the waters, take on projects and see how they go with that. And for me, another thing for individuals who may not be sure is actually to invest that time understanding you and becoming more self-aware. There's lots of tools and out there that people can actually be clear about what the strengths are, what makes them tick, what are they really good at, what are the strengths, what would they need to develop if they want to actually take on the leadership and management roles. Andre's absolutely right that, it's not for everyone, but there are things that people can do and test out to see if that's the direction that they want to go in.
Can I just add one more thing to what Andre and Dennis were saying? I think clinically and professionally, we are taught not that failure is not an option. You fail, then it causes patient harm, or causes service harm. That's how we're conditioned and told that failure is not an option. And people need to be comfortable with failure, taking small steps in, doing projects and then seeing if that works, and whether that's for them before they choose to go into management. That's a nice route. And maybe, Mish, this is for another podcast for you. Much like in research, you see, we don't hear about failure from leaders. You always are showing leaders in successful positions, and we talk about all our successes. But very seldom we hear about all the failures that led us to that position, and how comfortable are we in talking about every failure that we've had along the way. And I think for juniors to hear that, to know that it's okay for me to fail, I can take small steps to lead me to succeed and become a good leader, I think that's equally important as well.
And can I just add to that very briefly? You're absolutely right, Vimal. And I think sometimes what we forget is that the greatest learning can come from the failures.
Absolutely. That is what builds a lot of your resilience. The bad moments, everything that went wrong. everything that went wrong makes you learn, and it makes you realize that actually, even in the worst situation, it's not over. You go again. So yeah, I agree, Vimal. The main things you remember is those. Oh, actually, the main things you reference when you need to get through a bad situation is some of the crises that happened previously. So that's what builds the resilience.
I was just going to add to that, that I always get, my heart always sinks when people say failure and tag blame to that, so something's failed, let's go and find who to blame quick, we have to find a target to blame, and then never think that we're in a human activity system that is not 100%. There is going to be failure, and if that failure is a big tragedy, that's terrible. That is terrible. But let's find out what led to that terrible outcome and not seek to blame the person at the end point of it. Let's find out what happened, all those steps, and find out, what happened beforehand. What were the processes, the decisions, what happened that led us to this terrible outcome, instead of blaming. And I find sometimes leaders are quickly fall into finding out who can we blame so that we can have this focus of attention on this particular person or service, and let that be the focus there, instead of, this is a human activity system. We've got to find out what happened. How did we get to this end point? What were the steps that led us there? And then try and sort that out so we can minimize this happening again. And I find sometimes leaders themselves don't do that. And I feel quite frustrated by, a few odd leaders that seem to go quickly into finding blame to, for like I say, people or others to shoulder. Yeah.
That's
My
another,
issue.
that's a whole other podcast about moving from a blame culture to a learning culture, and that's really what we should all be striving to be working and enabling a learning culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. Julian, have you got any other questions? Maria, we didn't hear you. Did you want to add something to Julian's?
Oh, well, I suppose when you talk about leadership and then failure, I mean, and seeing it, if it's not, if people try it and it's not for them, I think they need to realize that they're not failing, and they've, got valuable contributions to make to their work, to their career, to a team. And you can't have everybody as a leader of a team anyway. So I think it's really important that, some of the pressures that we face as a leader, it isn't going to suit. And I think Andre said this, that it doesn't suit everyone, and it can be very stressful, and that someone might thrive in a different position and contribute in that way. So yeah, I think leadership is not the ultimate thing that everybody has to do, and I think that people can feel pressured to do certain things when they get to a certain stage, and it might not be for them. So to feel that is all right, and then to really look and see and ask yourself, and I think everybody's mentioned this about finding out what you want, what your strengths are, what your values are, and then going with that.
Absolutely, I agree, because everyone's just got different personalities, and everyone's just got different levels of resilience and thresholds of stress, and people's aspirations sometimes are not aligned with their personalities and what they're capable of doing. And I always say to people, you're not successful if you don't go into management. Absolutely, it's a great thing to do if you want to do. But some people, I've spoken to people, and they feel pressurized in terms of making another step in their career and what they need to do. But management is often not what people think it's going to be when they go into it. And you'll go into it, and unless you are prepared for what it entails, it's not going to be an enjoyable experience. So that's what I always say to people when they say to me, I'd ask me for advice. I say, look, take additional responsibility in the team. See how it feels. Like, ask the manager, like, look, let me lead a team meeting. Let me take on a project. Let me, take additional and see how you feel about it. See how it goes. Just warm into it, and see if it feels good for you. And there'll be plenty of people who are listening. You're like, yeah, I can't do those type of things. It's not that you can't do it. You got to try it first. You could try it first and see how you feel about it. You might surprise yourself. You might find that it's amazing. Oh wow, I didn't think I could ever do that. I'm getting comfortable in doing it. But when you just kind of like jump from no responsibility to all the responsibility, or attempt to have all the responsibility, it might be a bit of a big transition. So yeah.
Do you want to say anything else, Joanne?
Yep. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, everybody, for your insights. I'm sure people like budding therapists and students will probably find these insights a lot more approachable. Something they can aspire to, something they can work towards, that is to actively seek experiences, whether or not they have that clarity, whether or not they have that determination. It's okay, just go and try it out anyway, make mistakes. I think that's very comforting, for perhaps those new to the profession would like fear, and then eventually they'll get to where you are. I'm really mindful of time. Yeah. We are beyond our 1 hour.
Yeah. Thank you, Joanne. Okay, so I'm going to sort of end the podcast now, if that's okay. And really, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure people are going to be really glad we had this podcast, and it's going to inspire and inform a lot of aspiring leaders at every level. And your wisdom advice is going to be great for them. I wanted to end with a quote from Angela Davis, renowned American political activist, philosopher, academic, and author. And she says, we have to talk about liberating minds as well as liberating society. And I think all of you have helped us to liberate our minds a little bit about our place as leaders and where we can be leaders and how we can be leaders. And Gandhi said, we have to be the change we want to see in the world, but to do that, we have to disrupt and dismantle the barriers in our minds, to start movement to make the change, and while en route, make a chink in systemic and structural barriers external to the person to disrupt and dismantle here too. So I think it's about getting the mind tingly about leadership, and whether we take it forward or not is another thing, but we can be leaders at every level. Thank you again for your time. Thank you very much.